Hello traders, Mark Chapman here. I'm the creator of the trademarked Trap Traders concept. Welcome to this week's look ahead. Today's date is the 7th of February 2016 and we're going to take a look at the risk event calendar for the coming week. It's fairly thin on the ground in terms of risk events this week after a jam-packed week last week where we saw several central banks lowering expectations regarding interest rate policy and further monetary easing. We had negative sentiment out of the RBNZ with their central bank stating that later in the year they do see the potential for more QE stroke a drop in interest rates. We had similar sentiment out of the RBA and the Australian Central Bank, and we had really negative sentiment from Mark Carney, the Bank of England's governor, regarding the chances of an interest rate rise in the UK. As commodity prices weigh on inflation, we saw the Monetary Policy Committee vote 9-0 in favour of holding interest rates at their current levels. In essence, this has kicked an interest rate hike into the long grass, with many thinking this won't happen now until well into 2017. This is really negative sentiment for sterling, and I expect to see that leak into this week and beyond as the pound continues to weaken since the back end of last year and the turn of 2016. These risk events from last week will definitely play a part in this week's trading and beyond, so keep an eye on that so that you can make some smart choices. The big news we had at the back end of last week was non-farm payrolls, which did massively disappoint on the headline figure. However, the unemployment rate was at its lowest level for several years and hourly average earnings did a lot better than expected. This is why we saw a turnaround in dollar fortunes as Friday's trading progressed. I think in many pairs this will continue on into this week, but looking at the calendar for this week, we do see that on Wednesday Fed Chair Yellen testifies, and on Thursday as well. So make sure you pick the bones out of her statements for any further confirmation about how many hikes we perhaps can expect from the Fed this year. Monday, Tuesday there's no real risk events to note. Wednesday we've got UK manufacturing production, as I said the Fed Yellen speaks, and crude oil inventories, which is obviously important given the current glut in oil supply across the world. Thursday we've got unemployment claims from the US, not expected to be that much different. Yellen testifies again, and then we've got the RBA Governor Stephen speaking about the state of the Australian economy. We've got the German preliminary GDP for quarter on quarter expected at unchanged, and US core retail sales and consumer sentiment rounds up the week's major events. As I said, it's quite thin on the ground, so expect last week's sentiment to bleed across into this week's trading. Certainly at the early part of the week, where there's nothing really to detract from last week's comments and numbers. Taking a look at the charts, I like the Canadian Swiss franc to the downside after several structure failure traps occurred in and around this area here. Should price pull back a little bit into that location there, in and around the 72.01 area, this looks like a great sell. But watch oil prices and the stock market when entering these trades, because you'll want to see oil selling off and the major stock indexes, because the Swiss franc will benefit as a safe haven currency under those conditions. Also keep an eye out for the Australian Swiss franc, which also saw traps occur in and around this area here, which are referred to as structure failure traps. If price pulls back in and around this area here, up at the 71.19 area, this looks like a great sell. But again, watch the stock market as you want it to be selling off for this pair to confirm the entry to the downside. And also keep an eye out on what Governor Stevens has to say from the central bank in Australia, as any dovish comments from him will result in further weakness in the Australian dollar. If you would like to join me in my live trade room to get analysis on all the pairs I'm trading and all the traps I'm considering, I'd love to see you there. Just click the button below to join me for my live trade room. Have a great week and I'll see you there.